Hello, everyone. Welcome to this talk about frozen DevOps. And thank you, first of all, for DevOpsDays Poznań for inviting me to give this talk. It's a new talk. It's strongly based on the findings from the State of DevOps report from Puppet from this year. I actually had, speaking of frozen, my Chrome just froze just a couple minutes before this presentation. So I'm Manuel Pais. I have had a number of different roles throughout my career. These days, I'm mostly known as one of the co-authors of the book Team Topologies with Matthew Skelton. So this talk, we're going to talk a little bit about how Team Topologies helps with DevOps. The book came out about 2 years ago. It has been quite well received, and we really like what Charles Betts said about the book, and that's how we think about it, is a set of innovative tools and concepts for structuring the next generation digital operating model. So this is not exactly the topic or the theme, this frozen in the sense. So people who are parents listening probably are familiar with this movie. I won't be repeating much of the movie, but it's true that sometimes the way we talk about DevOps, especially since it's been more than 10 years since it started, sometimes I find it's almost still like in some fairy tales sometimes about how things are going to change and become much more wonderful if we just do this thing or if we just do that thing. So we're going to look a little bit into that, some of those sort of myths or kind of fairy tale stories. But don't worry, this is not about Frozen, the movie. Like I said, the State of DevOps report is now 10 years old. It started in 2011. It includes answers. It's a survey that's answered by thousands of people all over the world, all kinds of sizes of organizations, from startups to large enterprises. Actually, I think about 1/3 of respondents are in an organization between 1,000 and 10,000 employees. So quite large. We're not talking about only startups or small organizations. We're looking at a broad range of organization sizes and industries as well. And so this year, they actually started looking into, okay, how does our team set up, what types of teams we have, what interactions they have, how do they relate to each other, how does that influence DevOps, right? So Puppet, actually, in their report, they sort of classify organizations based on their practices, based on how well the organization is doing also as a business. They classify organizations into 3 tiers: highly evolved, middle evolved, and low evolved organizations, right? So what does this mean effectively? Why does this matter, this sort of categorization? Well, we go back to the accelerate metrics. So if you're not familiar with that, it's deployment frequency, lead time for changes, mean time to repair, and change failure rate. These metrics are highly correlated with high performance in teams, right? So you can see these days, this year, those metrics means that highly evolved organizations and teams are able to go from a change request, a lead time for a change request is less than an hour. That's quite amazing, right? In less than an hour, we can take a request for change, make the modifications, and get it out in production and available to customers. And mean time to repair, the same. We can recover from most incidents in less than an hour if we're a high-performing organization. So when you compare that even to mid-level, where it might take a week, so we might do weekly deployments, so we can't go faster than that for new changes, and it might take up to a day to recover from an incident on average. So it's still quite an important difference. So what's interesting in the sort of percentage of organizations is that you can see since 2018, there's been a slight increase in high-performing organizations, from 10% to 18%. There's a slight decrease in low-performing from 11% to 4%. It kind of makes sense, right? These days, it's very hard to find an organization that has done nothing around DevOps. Most organizations understand there's value, but obviously the way that they go about implementing DevOps is different. So what's more interesting here is that the middle is very big, right? It has almost not changed, right? 78, 79% of organizations are in that middle. So much so that what Puppet did in their report was actually subdivide the middle into high mid, true mid, and low mid. We won't go into a lot of those details, but just keep in mind and think about why is it so hard to get to high performance? In other words, what are we not doing or what are we doing wrong that it's got us sort of stuck, sort of frozen in this middle, right? And the report also provides evidence that the recommendations in Team Topologies help to orient an organization towards becoming more highly evolved. So that start to see some indications of why some organizations are able to become highly evolved. So this is really the question I'm going to try to answer with this talk. Why are so many organizations frozen in that DevOps middle, not being able to go past certain level of performance as an organization? So the first thing that I hear in kind of middle, the organizations that are in that frozen middle, they have cloud. They are using public cloud. They have CI/CD tooling, pipelines, and much more visibility on their delivery. They probably have SRE. They have concerns about reliability. They're looking at perhaps service level objectives, indicators, and they're doing all those things. They maybe have observability as well. And this is all very important and necessary, but how exactly are we doing this? Do these correspond to teams or sometimes tribes? Is that good or bad? Or are we just talking about capabilities, regardless of which teams provide them? There's sort of ambiguity here about what does this actually mean in the day-to-day work and how teams work together. So the report found out organizations should not expect to become highly evolved just because they use cloud and automation. Yes, that's needed, but they are held back by organizational structure and dynamics. So one of the things when we're looking at all these capabilities that are obviously very important for DevOps is, are we actually helping teams unblock, right? So when we're saying blocking, it means let's say we have an application team or development team that needs to make some change, and you want to have that lead time under an hour, like high performing. Then if you have blocking dependencies where you say, well, now we have to stop and ask another team, the cloud team, let's say, to provide infrastructure, or we have to stop and ask the SRE team or the ops team to do a deployment for us, then these are blocking dependencies. Then very likely you won't be able to get to that lead time of under an hour. Right, and even to recover from an incident, even if you diagnose and find out what is the solution to your problem in production, if you want to follow the standard deployment process, you're not going to be able to do that in under an hour, probably. So those capabilities that I mentioned, they're really helping, but they're really superpowers, if you like, only when they're not blocking, right? When we have the ability to provide the CI/CD pipelines, to provide the observability tooling, and all those other things in ways that don't block teams that are trying to deliver changes. So those are non-blocking changes. Well, typically you have teams able to self-service what they need. And so to do that, we also need to have a better understanding of what kind of teams we have, right? Is the cloud team a sort of platform team that's providing a service to other teams so they can self-provision their needs? Or is the cloud team a sort of enabling team where they're helping, maybe we're kind of at the early stage and we need the development teams to learn how to use cloud in an effective way, in a cost-effective way, in a secure way, etc. So having an understanding of what types of teams exist helps. And so in Team Topologies, that's exactly what we've done with 4 fundamental types of teams. So very briefly, because this is not the core of the talk today, but we have streamlined teams that are delivering value. These are teams with end-to-end ownership of a service or part of a larger product. These are your, if you like, your typical build and run teams. We have enabling teams, usually a team of experts that are helping other teams overcome obstacles, reduce the learning curve for things like cloud, SRE, but anything else that we see a gap in most of the streamlined teams. We have platform teams where one or more teams are providing compelling internal services for the streamlined teams to use so that they don't have to know all the details of all the tooling in the lifecycle. And we have complicated subsystem teams, which are very specialized sort of niche case where we really have, maybe we need some PhD people to take care of very complicated algorithm or something like that. This diagram is just a snapshot, right? When we start having more clarity about what types of teams exist, do we have 5 streamlined teams? What are the services that they provide to our end customers? What are the services in the platform, the internal kind of services that streamlined teams consume? It starts to become much easier to have a good idea if we're in the right place. Are we applying those capabilities in the right way? Cloud, observability, CI/CD, or are there some gaps, and what do we need to do about it? Andrew Clay Schaefer was one of the initial people who drove the DevOps movement, along with Patrick Debois and many others. He said DevOps was always as much about org structure and incentives as any of the technical details. So we can't decouple the things and just look at technical side and say, well, we're done. So really, organizations where teams have strong identities that are well understood with clearly defined responsibilities are more likely to be higher performing. That's what State of DevOps report found this year. And you can see that high-performing organizations, you have much stronger agreement that there's an understanding of the responsibilities of different teams and how they relate to others. So the difference then to the frozen middle is that highly evolved organizations have teams with clear mission and purpose that is understood by other teams. Another aspect where organization gets stuck in that middle, in the frozen middle, is how we think about collaboration. And so in these organizations, there's this idea, well, everyone collaborates with everyone else when they need to, and that's always a good thing. Actually, collaboration is expensive for real-time work, and it's not scalable or repeatable. So let me break it down a bit more. In the past, when we had this sort of approach to the life cycle and how teams were mostly aligned to functional silos, where you had the test team and you had the ops team and you had the maintenance team, perhaps, we needed, and that's one of the main reasons why DevOps came about, there was a need for much more collaboration between these teams, because what was missing then was the feedback loops, right? Work was just passing from team to team, and there was lack of understanding of did we do a good job or not? What are the things that are problematic? Why does it take months to deliver a change, right? So at that time, years ago, what we're trying to do is start getting this feedback loop. If you're familiar with the DevOps handbook, they talk about this as the first way to start getting this feedback loop in the life cycle. So at that moment, if we were releasing, say, every 6 months or even every quarter, and we collaborated for 2-3 months to be able to release on a monthly basis, that's a no-brainer. Of course, we needed to do that collaboration. We needed to bring down those metrics to deliver much faster, recover from problems much faster. But today, in 2021, the margins are totally different. If we need to collaborate for 1 week with another team just to do a deployment, we're not able to do the deployment by ourselves. That's one release cycle that is lost, right? There's one opportunity to make changes for the customer that we've lost. For mid performance, for high performers, that would be a whole week that they could be delivering every day, multiple times a day. So the margins are much smaller, and that's why we need to to understand that now collaboration becomes more expensive because we're trading our ability to deliver value to customers with the collaboration. It doesn't mean that we never need collaboration, but we need to be more thoughtful about when does it make sense. Ideally, we're collaborating with other teams for things like reducing dependencies, that teams become more self-sufficient, that we improve the tooling that we use, that we improve platform that we use, that we find better solutions, but not for the day-to-day delivery of work or real-time work, as they mentioned in the report, right? So this is important to understand. So in Team Topologies, we actually talk about 3 interaction modes that are clearly defined. So we have collaboration defined as 2 teams working together for a defined period of time to discover some new things or to break some dependencies. Acts as a service is where one team provides a service that multiple teams consume without actually needing to ask for help or make requests to the provider, right? Provider consumer that's working well. And facilitation is where one team helps and mentors another team. So that's typical for enabling teams, which are usually experts in some domain. That might be observability, test automation, CI/CD, but their role is to help the streamline teams learn and become better in those domains. So the 3 interaction modes can actually happen between almost any 2 teams, but they're more common for different teams. So collaboration acts as a service, more common for platform, facilitating more common for enabling teams. The point is that we have a lot more clarity on what are we doing, why are we doing this, is it worth it, is it valuable? So the report says if you simply adopt the team types, you're missing one of the key takeaways, which is paying attention and being deliberate about team setup and desired interaction. And obviously, what is the desired goal from this interaction? So highly evolved organizations compared to the frozen ones in the middle is that they welcome purposeful interactions with clear goals and duration as well, or expected duration, right? It's not open-ended collaboration where things actually end up becoming dependencies. If we're saying we're collaborating all the time with this other team to do provisioning, then it's a blocking dependency after all, right? It's not really helping us evolve. Another common theme is, or in other words, in some organizations in the middle, what happens is that they went to almost the other extreme where they said, well, we just want to have build and run teams that are fully autonomous. This is quite hard in multiple aspects. First of all, if we're saying this team can be totally autonomous without depending on any other team, whether it's a blocking dependency or non-blocking dependency, then we're saying they're being expected to own the entire tech stack, right? Understand everything about the infrastructure, the cloud they're using, CI/CD, networking, security, etc., without any help. I've had conversations with clients where they've actually counted how many tools were being used by a team in the whole life cycle, and that's more than 100, right? So you can imagine how hard this is for a single team. And the problem lies in the cognitive load that this sort of build run teams that are left to their devices accrue, right? And so if cognitive load is left unbounded, says the report, then performance metrics like the accelerate metrics will be negatively affected, preventing teams from evolving to higher levels. So too high cognitive load on teams prevents them from improving on this accelerate metrics. Not only that, you can actually have high performing teams. If they're just being asked to do more and more, given more responsibilities, they might actually come back to mid performance when the cognitive load just becomes sort of unbearable. So this is something we need to keep in mind. And the point is, as Jeff Sussna was saying, is how do real-world organizations structure themselves for DevOps? You can't just put everyone on a single silo-less team. That would be perhaps the ideal, but it's not. It's just not possible. We need an ecosystem of teams. And one of the things that the report finds, and we've been talking about it in Team Topologies, is that the valuable platform reduces the cognitive load of stream-aligned teams. So very briefly, I'll explain what cognitive load is, the total amount of mental effort being used in the working memory. This is for an individual, but we take this definition to the team as the combination of the cognitive capacity of all the elements in the team. And cognitive load is actually divided into 3 types. Intrinsic has to do with all the skills we need to do our day-to-day work. Extraneous had to do with kind of the mechanics, things that need to happen to deliver the value. And germane is when we're actually thinking about the problem space. What do the customers need? What is the problem that they need solved, or tasks they need to do? And how is our product or service going to provide that? So the extraneous there in the middle means things like when we have to remember, how do I deploy the application, or how do I access a test environment, or how do I create a test environment, or how do I access the test database? All those things that are taking up our effort. Or how does this tool work again for monitoring? All these things are extraneous cognitive load. And what we want to do for the stream-aligned teams, the teams delivering value to our end customers, is to increase their germane capacity and minimize the others, right? And what's interesting with the platform is what ends up happening is that extraneous cognitive load for stream-aligned team becomes germane cognitive load for platform teams. There's kind of a shift. So what do I mean exactly? So if we have to worry about the tools, the infrastructure, access to all the things around, authentication, continuous delivery, infrastructure provisioning, monitoring, telemetry, and any other sort of services that you might think could make sense in a platform, then if we don't have a good platform, then that means the build and run teams have to worry about all these things. So that's extraneous cognitive load for them. But if this is part of the platform, this is actually what the platform teams are focused on, right? They're providing these services to the stream-aligned team. So that means this is germane for them. This is their sort of business, right? As a team, is to provide good services that meet customers' needs, the internal customers' needs on these domains. So when we've been able to shift that extraneous cognitive load from stream-aligned teams to the platform team, which is now germane cognitive load, then this is where we actually start to scale these practices, capabilities in an effective way. So the report found that highly evolved firms use a combination of stream-aligned teams and platform teams as the most effective way to manage cognitive load at scale. So it's not just reducing. Of course, we should reduce when we can. Sometimes automation helps reduce. Sometimes when we have people pair programming, mob programming, it helps to reduce cognitive load because they learn, they become better. But it's also about shifting and managing cognitive load that we can't remove in a better way at scale. So eventually, highly evolved organizations, compared to the frozen ones in the middle, what they do is they have an ecosystem of loosely coupled teams, remember, with minimal blocking dependencies, ideally none, which promotes fast flow and continuous learning. So we understand that it's not just about each individual team doing better and providing capabilities, but actually, do we have an ecosystem, a team of teams that is improving and it's optimizing for fast flow, right, without blocking dependencies? If you are familiar with DevOps Handbook, this is really about the second and the third ways in the DevOps Handbook, right? Optimizing for flow and continuous learning. One last common thing I see in the frozen middle is almost every organization says we have a platform team, or we have a platform, and this platform is solving problems that are common for many teams. Okay, that is obviously a good thing, but how exactly are we going about doing this? And so the report again says the existence of a platform team does not inherently unlock higher evolution DevOps. It's not just because we have a platform team that we're going to be able to achieve that higher performance. So what we tend to see is lower performers see the platform as just a set of shared services that are provided to teams, sometimes mandated on teams, and they're usually driven by, well, these are common things that teams need, and we're standardizing, making every team use it the same way. And that's not exactly where you get the benefits, where you get to high performance. You're actually constraining a bit too much the teams. So we need a common definition that helps explain what is a platform for high-performing teams. What are the characteristics? So Evan Botcher has a really good definition. He says a digital platform is a foundation of self-service APIs, tools, services, but also knowledge and support arranged as a compelling internal product. If you've seen any of my other talks, you've probably heard me explain this definition. But so it's really first about self-service. So the platform is not a request-based team, right? It's not a team answering requests to do this or fix that. They're providing capabilities in a self-service way, but they're looking at what is the knowledge that teams need to be able to use those self-service capabilities. What is the support they need to learn about those self-service capabilities? And how do we provide this in a compelling way? That is not a mandate. It's actually helping teams do their work more effectively. So successful platform teams treat the platform as a product. The report found as well. They strive to create a compelling value proposition for application teams. So it's a mindset shift in terms of how we think about a platform. It's not just a technology hub. It's not just providing shared services. Is actually thinking, understanding much more who are the customers, what is the experience they need, are different customers having different experiences because they have different knowledge backgrounds, how do we cater to that? It's all these things that you would be thinking if you're looking at it as a product. So what exactly is platform as a product? What does this mean? So I'll give you a few kind of ideas of what it means. So a platform as a product is optional to use. We're not forcing teams to use the platform, right? Just as with any product, I'm not forced to use an iPhone if I prefer an Android or if I don't want any of those, right? That's a product. We're trying to, we need to get adoption that is organic from teams. Courtney Kistler has a really great mention, which I totally agree. And she says, anytime standards, practices, processes, frameworks, or architectures become a mandate, I've seen little to no adoption. So Courtney has been CTO and technical lead at companies like Nike, Starbucks, and others. So she has a really strong path and with a lot of experience, and she's never seen something mandated becoming, effectively adopted. Sometimes teams will use it because they have to, but it's not really helping them. Sometimes it's increasing cognitive load instead of reducing. A platform as a product is also carefully designed and curated for its customers. So that means, first of all, we need to understand who the customers are. What do they know? What do they want? What are the frustrations that they have? And then we can design and curate the platform for them. And this doesn't mean that we're going to build a whole new tech, a whole new Kubernetes tool or something. We're going to leverage as much as possible the technology that exists, right? So another part of a platform as a product is that we're taking advantage of technology changes, the evolution in the industry. What we're doing is ideally have a thin layer on top of that provides a much nicer experience for our teams. So many companies have done this now. So some good examples from companies like Airbnb. They did this really, really well when they adopted Kubernetes. And Adidas and other organizations have done this exact same thing. So it's not about building all this stuff in the platform, it's providing a much better experience, leveraging what third parties provide, but making it much easier to consume for our teams. because we understand what they need. A platform as a product also uses modern product management and follows the adoption lifecycle. So obviously, if it's a product, we need to think of it and manage and evolve it as a product, right? And that's actually quite hard. Many organizations have a hard time to have good product development practices for the end customer products, let alone for the platforms, for the internal platforms. But it's really key. I often recommend clients to get their best product managers more experienced in the internal platform, because it's the customers are internal, so it becomes even more important to have a proper thinking around what should this platform provide. What should we do next? What are the priorities, right? We can't just be responding randomly to requests from internal teams. We need to listen to them and then prioritize and so on. At the end of the day, we'll get happier engineers, the users of platform, ideally with no or very little technology bloat, which has been a problem in the past with many platforms. And we design to evolve, right? We're not building big things up front. We're evolving this as we understand the requests and the needs from teams. So finally, the report found highly evolved platform teams understand their internal customers and offer a curated set of technologies for infrastructure and development capabilities. So again, the report showing that these ideas have correlation, have a correspondence to the reality of the surveyed organizations. And so you can see in high performing organizations, the use of internal platforms in the sense of platform as a product is much higher, is double than mid-level and multiple times higher than low. And it's still only about 50% in highly evolved organizations. There's a lot of ground here still to cover. It's sort of a new thing still. A lot of people have talked about platform as a product for a long time, but we haven't had really consistent ways of talking about it, explaining what it is, and how do you go about implementing this. So for highly evolved organizations, they treat the platform as a product, a curated experience for a user. So it's the point of view of what is this platform for, who is it for, how it should be provided. So I'm getting to the end. So one of the key things that I took from the report is this idea that success at scale requires optimizing not for the individual, not for the team, but for the wider organization, the team of teams, which is what we talk about in Team Topologies. Highly evolved organizations have discovered the patterns that work well for a fast flow of change. And so obviously in our experience helping customers, we've seen this work. So applying the patterns from Team Topologies, reducing blockers to fast flow, and we've seen that work. But it's nice to see that the report has now the data that proves that across a large number of organizations across the world. That's about it. Just a few resources on teamtopologies.com. You can find examples of organizations that have used the platform approach, like USwitch, Wealth Wizards, and others, Cross, etc., and resources if you want to get started. We've also launched our Team Topologies Academy a few months ago. And just on the 15th of October, we're going to launch this course, Platform as a Product, where we cover these ideas that we've been talking about today. We have created a code for the people watching, 20% off with the code TTDOD Poznań. So check it out if you're interested to know more. I think there's still a lot more we need to talk about as an industry around this idea of platform as a product, how our platform teams expect it to behave, how do we grow platforms in large organizations that maybe we can have just a single platform. But there's more to come there. I'm really getting to the end of my time. I want to thank you, my name, on the name of Matthew Skelton, my co-author, for listening. And I hope this was useful and provided some hints on how to defrost your DevOps if you're stuck in the middle. Thank you very much.
Okay, and we have a question. Manuel, how do you feel that there is a minimal technical level of skill to enable as a service interaction style?
That's a good question. So I wouldn't say necessarily at a minimal technical level of skill, but it's actually what we need is to, especially for platform teams, to collaborate with the other teams, right? So that's one of the examples where if we're building a new platform service or even some new features or a new version or some API that is being consumed by our internal teams, we can't do that in isolation, right? So we need to, that's when collaboration makes sense. We're going to collaborate with 1, 2, 3 of the streamline teams or development teams, if you like, to understand what do you need. We're not going to build this by ourselves, just imagining what they need. That's when collaboration makes sense. And so we can quickly identify what is needed, and then we can go and build that service or features and grow the experience over time. So that's where I didn't go into a lot of detail, where you need to look at the adoption lifecycle, right? Not every team is going to adopt this new service all of a sudden, right? We need to see what are still maybe frictions for some teams. Do we need to improve documentation? Do we need to give more examples, etc., until we can say this service can be provided in this X as a service way, right? We expect from the level of documentation, the ease of use, that teams can adopt it by themselves. So it's more about when have we done enough understanding, collaboration, and looking at the adoption lifecycle for this particular service or new version of the service that we can say this can now be consumed by everyone in this X as a service way. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the platform team is probably going to be inundated with requests for help. But we don't know how to use this, or we have these problems, or it's not available, this new service. So it's more about that. But obviously, there has to be technical skills in the platform team that's building that service.